As chairs of the digital asset subcommittees on the financial services, in-house agriculture committees, I just wanted to start with a high-level view in landscape setting. So how are you guys thinking about digital assets in your day-to-day work as Congress, and where do you think we can make the most progress in fulfilling President Trump's dream for the U.S. to be the crypto capital of the world?
You first?
Washington, particularly Congress, only really acts when there's a deadline, right? That's why we always go up against these cliffs. And so that has caused our work on digital assets to languish just a little bit. But Bryan and I are leaning in on this message to our colleagues that there is a deadline. And in the next 18 months, there will be as much innovation and as much transformation in this space as there has been in the last 18 years. And we better get our crap together, because otherwise we are going to miss out on some really incredible opportunities. And not for just the crypto bros or folks in Silicon Valley, but for most every single industry that will be transformed by blockchain more quickly than almost anybody realizes. When we talk about that, when we provide that urgency, we get their attention, and that's why we're going to pass a bill this year.
I think you're also looking at coming off of 4 disastrous years under the Biden administration with Gary Gensler at the helm of the SEC. And so I think there's a real hunger to turn the tide on this. You see that through executive actions through President Trump with our new regulators in place, the SEC and the CFTC. That's positive, and I think people are really excited about the direction we're going. But then it's let's build on that energy and move both of these bills, stablecoin and market structure, across the line as quickly as possible. Because what Dusty said is absolutely right. There is a hunger and an appetite to take what Gensler pushed offshore outside the United States and to bring it onshore into the United States. And Dusty and I talk a lot about this. States like Wisconsin and North Dakota, people don't think of that sometimes. If you went out to the general public and said, who's leading in the crypto space, they might not jump and say South Dakota or Wisconsin. But I actually think it's actually the right spot to be, because what we have as an opportunity as we enter Web 3 with blockchain technology is to take away what happened in Web 2 with the centralization of corporate control, in particular in places like Silicon Valley and New York, and have that innovation and development occurring in basements and dorm rooms in Wisconsin and South Dakota, not just law firms and boardrooms in San Francisco and New York.
And how do you guys see the legislative priorities playing out right now? I think we've seen quite a lot of activity from the regulators, especially the SEC and CFTC, but legislative clarity is something that people have been clamoring about for a long time. So thinking about your roles and where you want to go from here.
Well, I mean, these 2 bills that are in front of us are the 2 gorillas in the room. President Trump is driving in on this. Those that watched the crypto summit at the White House and heard President Trump speak, President Trump made it clear he wants to get both of these bills across the line before we hit to August. And we are positioning ourselves and are positioned to deliver on that priority. I think if you get the stablecoin legislation through, Genius, Stable in the House, as well as market structure, we're in a position to really unleash a lot of innovation development, because there's going to be more investment in this space, and it's going to be inside the U.S. rather than abroad. And so I think we're looking at these 2 pieces of legislation as being transformative in delivering on that promise to put that structure in place. Again, the regulators have made great strides. We are in such a different world than we were even 6 months ago. But we also know that clarity and that stability is important for us to know that that's going to be there not only in the Trump administration, but administrations in the future, that we will never go back to a time where Gary Gensler was doing policy development through enforcement actions. And as investment and work is being put in this space, the more clarity, the more stability we provide people, the more we're going to see that development occur in the U.S.
That's all absolutely right. I would channel my inner Yogi Berra by saying it gets late really early around here. Don't quote me on the number because I haven't counted, but if you told me there are only 15 weeks of legislative work between now and the end of the year, I would say that maybe that's true. Maybe it's 18. Maybe it's 14, but that's about right. I mean, we will be locked up with 3 or 4 weeks doing the appropriation stuff coming out of the House. We'll have a week or 2 at the end where we're dealing with the year-end spending package. We'll have a week or 2 on the annual defense bill. We'll have a week on the highway bill, surface transportation reauthorization. Like, you start to pluck out these weeks, and all of a sudden you kind of get out of time. You're going to have maybe 4 weeks where the Speaker and the Whip and the leader are going to have an opportunity to figure out what is really going to move. Getting it out of the House the first time is not a problem. Now, we need to run up the score. If we have 92 Dem votes, that is going to make our prospects in the Senate much stronger than if we have 49 Dem votes. And we own that. So is Angie Craig and Don Davis and Richie Torres and all our wonderful, brilliant partners on the other side of the aisle. But the real question is, how does the interplay with the Senate work? And I would say that's where we need to do a little more work thinking about, I mean, we can take Genius, but I don't think they would necessarily take our Clarity Act lock, stock, and barrel. There's going to be some dickering there.
In terms of, we'll just focus on working together at this point. Yeah. We had Chairman Hill in earlier, and he said that the last time that the two committees worked so closely on things were the swap issues that were in Dodd-Frank. Curious how you are thinking about working together and where the committees are bridging gaps with one another, like what kinds of policy issues you're thinking of as kind of falling into that middle space that really brought you all into this discussion with one another and working not only across the aisle, but between the committees themselves.
I don't want to make this too simplistic, but it is hard to overstate the importance of personal connections. Patrick McHenry, 30 years ago, loaned me his car at a college Republican convention so I could take a pretty girl out on a date. And he's been a really good friend ever since, and we worked incredibly close on Fit 21.
Cue the Dusty Johnson prom date photo.
Summer Mersinger and Dusty, yeah, that's right. I understand French was talking a little bit about my prom experiences. And frankly, if you were to see a picture of me at prom, you couldn't handle that. That much sex appeal, 145 pounds of pure man meat, just unbridled for you all. Can I get back to my point, please? Quit thinking about me that way. But and then French Hill is one of my top 20 favorite people on the Hill, and then Bryan and I are legitimately good personal friends. I mean, we can go out and have drinks, as we did last night, and really almost unencumbered by business. I actually like his company, and frankly, almost no one does. And so and the same thing is true with Angie, and I love Don Davis, and because we can just cut through the shit, I can just say, no, listen, we can give on this, but we can't give on that. That has allowed the committees to work in a collaborative way beyond what is normal in this town.
To build on that, what Dusty says is directionally right on the relationships and the friendships that have been built. We're also standing on the shoulders of Patrick McHenry, who you referenced, G.T. Thompson. But as you look at the players in this space, I actually think it's some of the most smart, intelligent, thoughtful members of Congress. If you were in the room and we're sitting and discussing this, I mean, Jim, to give a throw to Jim Himes, for example, Jim Himes is pulling out definitions, going through footnotes, asking the reference, how's this going to interact with a section of SEC code? And it is cerebral. It's not the conversations that are, well, I don't like this, but you like that. I mean, it is in the weeds, which then means you're actually at substance. The other is, if we're really honest, other than I firmly disagree with where President Biden and Gary Gensler took us in this isn't an inherently partisan area. I disagreed with what they did, but it wasn't actually like that was some sort of liberal philosophy that was inherent, right? You can be a progressive like Richie Torres and be as pro-market structure as Dusty Johnson and Bryan Steil are. And so getting in the weeds and the substance, and that's where a lot of this room is really effective at advocacy, is going and actually talking on the substance of the bill. And if we go back to the hearing we had yesterday, I'll talk to the financial services side, I'll let Dusty maybe comment on the ag side. The critiques of the bill weren't really on the substance of the bill. And so the compliments on the bill were actually on the substance. So if you listen to it, you said, what I really heard was people liking the substance of the bill. And at the end of the day, this isn't even bipartisan. And what I mean by that is there really shouldn't be sides. This is about making sure that America is leading the way in Web3 and in blockchain. And to get the focus back onto that removes the partisan bickering that breaks this town down time and time again.
And Congressman Johnson, do you want to talk about the Ag Committee hearing at all, or?
We are in a better, yes, everything Bryan said, and probably plus a little, in that we don't have Maxine Waters in the Ag Committee. And listen, she's respected by her members, many of her members. Angie Craig is just, she understands the bill at a much deeper level than many members do, and I think Angie Craig, who would have all the reason in the world to play politics with this, like why wouldn't she just want to punch Dusty Johnson and Donald Trump in the face? She's running for Senate, but she chooses instead to try to play it, she really do her job. And we're in a better spot in the Ag Committee. We got a few senior members who are problematic, but overwhelmingly the vibe of the hearing was, as Bryan said, which was the detractors were talking about side issues, and the complementers were talking about the nuts and bolts.
So for the Clarity Act, what do you all see as the next tangible steps to advance it forward and to get it onto the president's desk?
We're going to mark up real soon. I mean, real soon. We're getting close. Bryan mentioned the brilliance of Jim Himes. He's exactly right about that. And we've got a few other questions we need to work through with our colleagues. I mean, when we went through the FIT 21 negotiations, I mean, it was a 7-hour telephone meeting on Saturday before the markup with me, 6 Dems. Russ Benham was in and out of there and very helpful. Unlike Gary Gensler, Russ Benham was incredibly helpful. And they were really engaged. And we needed to take care of things for Jonathan Jackson. And we needed to take care of things for Nikki Budzinski. We needed to take care of things for Yadira Caraveo, and we did. And we are, the store is still open. If there's stuff you don't like about Clarity, continue to let us know. But I would say the next step in the process is in the next 2 weeks, we're really going to get to nuts and bolts with members like Richie and Himes and Warren Davidson, and the folks on the Ag Committee I've already mentioned, and then we're going to have a hearing and we're going to pass it out on a broadly bipartisan basis.
Yeah, and the markup's been noticed. We're moving forward on this next week, and then the work, right, which is the part that is not noticed, that sits out there, right, is to align this and work with our colleagues in the Senate. Because the goal of this is not to simply just pass it on the House floor and be done. And that's not a critique of last cycle. We are in a totally different political environment, which is really exciting. And so passing this on the House floor and that being the end is like Model UN, where it's like Madagascar and Mongolia create a free trade agreement, and you're all excited, and then you realize there's no trade, right? And it's Model UN. This is real. We want to fire with live bullets. So to do that, it's not to pass it on the House floor and then to congratulate ourselves and have a cocktail. That is like, how do we get this through markup and then work with our Senate colleagues and work with the administration? And that work is substantive and ongoing and has been ongoing for quite some time. And so that is like the real home stretch of this is delivery on the House floor. This markup is going to be essential, making sure that we have the engagement, but then getting this all the way across the line is the only measure of success that I think we should be marking ourselves with.
And you guys all know this, but in the Senate, they really, really prioritize stablecoin. And Genius is getting to be a pretty good piece of work, don't get me wrong. It's just in some respects they're not quite as advanced in thinking about some of the nuances. And there are some different concepts, clearly, in their market structure bill. And then their 2 committees have not worked like our 2 committees have. So we've got some, yes, ongoing, still lots of work to do there.
In terms of sequencing, you all have made huge strides forward with the markups coming soon, and which were noticed for next week in the Financial Services Committee. On Clarity, how are you thinking about the stable piece as well?
I think the goal here is to work backwards. And so I think the goal is to pass and have both signed into law. And then I think our action should be driven by how do we reach that measure of success. And so we have lots of conversations. There's lots of conversations on this. I've had lots of discussions with our colleagues in the Senate and in the White House. And what I'm less tied to is which order of operation we utilize. I'm driven by the outcome. And too often this town, writ large, loves to measure everything by inputs. And what I'm trying to push everybody on is we should only be measured on the output. Meaning, is this legislation, both stablecoin legislation as well as market structure, signed into law? Not, does it pass the House first? Does it pass the Senate first? Does it pass the House and die in the Senate? I'm not interested. Personally, I'm just not interested in that. I'm interested in being successful, having it signed into law. And then if we get there and we begin working backwards on the final stretch of this, that's how we should be analyzing this and understanding that the Senate calendar is their currency. right, which is different than the House calendar. The House calendar, we always have time to bring forward and pass legislation on the House floor because we can throw it under a rule, knock it out in an hour debate. Totally different than the Senate operation, which is fine, but we have to think and work with our Senate colleagues to say, how do we get to success? And success is both signed into law.
I'm not going to add to that. I chuckled during the first part of Bryan's answer, and it wasn't that he said anything intrinsically funny. It's that I used that exact same phrase on the House floor to describe this process an hour ago when I was talking to some of my Democratic colleagues. So it just, there's a tremendous mind meld, and I would associate myself with his comments.
We have quite a few people from the industry in this room who are doing a lot of the deep policy thinking, and I would love to hear from both of you how you think the industry can be a helpful thought partner and also help get these across the finish line. I think both the stablecoin effort and the market structure effort are huge priorities for the industry. So curious on your take, how we can be good partners in that kind of effort and trying to get things across the finish line.
Listen, Fit 21 was a really good piece of work for the time in which it flowered. And a lot of people in this room helped to make Fit 21 pretty good. But listen, it was deficient in three pretty key ways that are more obvious now than it was then. And it is this room, it is this part of the industry that got us to clarity. And I think there's a lot of credit to go around. I mean, good job for French and Dusty and Bryan, who did not have pride of authorship on Fit 21, and GT, who instead were willing to say, all right, let's have a new concept for when things would transition from the SEC to the CFTC. So it's a good job on us on not being stubborn, but good job on you all on continuing to engage. Sometimes you had to raise issues 15, 16, 17 times before we heard you, we understood you, and we integrated it into the mark. And so I don't know that I can coach you all to do anything better than what you have already done over the course of the last 2 years. We are here at this spot because of you all.
Dusty's absolutely right. Let me jump to an unrelated or tangential topic as well. Educating people in this space is like teaching calculus and math to a people with a wide array of an understanding. People that are starting at like multiplication tables, and other people that are actual math geniuses that are on the home stretch. And I think sometimes we come in and don't match the level of the audience, and you see that. I mean, you guys are up there on the hill. And I often find myself sharing like the introduction to Read, Write, Own by Chris Dixon, the first 17 pages before the book actually begins, and being like, let's level set about what this is. Because when you say crypto, you say blockchain, a lot of people immediately jump to a linear. And they jump in and they think, aha, we're talking Bitcoin, or we're talking meme coin, or we're talking this. And miss the big picture, which is kind of my opening comments. Why does a member from Wisconsin or South Dakota care about this space? You care about it because it's going to be transformative to the U.S. economy. And if you think about why the United States is differentiated from our peers around the globe, Western Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, in many ways, we won the Web 2 race. If you look at 401ks and pension plans, if you look at job opportunities for kids coming out of high school, technical college, and colleges, it's that we domicile the overwhelming number of tech companies around the globe. And buying into that broader message about what we're doing and why these foundational principles are important is really important to start with, so that people buy in to why we're working on this in the first place, why we're in the office using up their time, and they don't write it off as a simple linear. Then there's other people, right? The Jim Himes of the world, the Richie Torres of the world, that want to go layers and layers deep, and the expertise in this room is actually needed in that regard, but also to make sure we're staying at a 50,000-foot level about why are we spending time and resources and energy in this space. I think sometimes the folks of us that understand this space jump all the way into the weeds a little quicker than we should, versus the stage setting about why do we care about this as American policymakers. And the argument of that, I think, is actually the strongest point behind making sure we get this legislation across the line.
I think one thing I'd love to hear from both of you is other use cases or topics that aren't necessarily getting the spotlight or the conversation, but you want to pursue during your times as chairs of the digital asset subcommittees. Because I know stablecoins and market structure, there's a lot of noise around both of those, but what else comes to mind that you guys are interested in?
I don't think we have a full, number one, we don't, when I say every industry is going to be transformed, I really believe that. I mean, in some instances, users will understand that, but in some instances, they won't. Like some of it will be back office stuff, some of it will be just like Web 2, where everybody's using it every day in ways that we couldn't even have imagined really 15 years ago. But I'm also really interested to see so I'm interested in the blockchain and how that gets utilized. I'm also really interested in DeFi, because I don't think we have a very sophisticated understanding of where that's going to end up. And it's not really the job of government officials to dreamcast where that's going to be. Like, it's not, who cares what I think? I shouldn't really be in that business. But just as a citizen, I want to think about where that goes, because the Hippocratic Oath is instructive here. I mean, first, do no harm. Let's make sure that clarity, or whatever comes after that, doesn't foreclose those opportunities.
Implementation of this bill is going to be absolutely critical. And so let's assume we've passed both, they're signed into law, and that rulemaking process begins. Implementation of this is actually going to be really important at the agency level. I think we got great leaders President Trump has put in place, great folks at the SEC, CFTC, and actually other areas across the government. But that oversight role is going to actually be really essential. And then just to build on Dusty's, the transformative nature that is potential here will actually set up a lot of really interesting areas for us to work. And I always look back, and if you go back and watch Back to the Future 2, and they travel to 2014, which is scary that was 11 years ago, and they arrive, and there are flying cars, but they're taking phone calls in phone booths. The reason for that is the human mind is really good at incremental change. And so what kid didn't get in a car and say, can't we just fly this car rather than drive the car? But almost nobody could think that the phone connected to a wire that went through the ground to your grandma's house so you could hear her voice would one day be an iPhone in your pocket connected to a tower, and it makes no sense. And so the incremental change that we often see in the financial services space, which will be transformative in the financial services space, I can see, because I can see that efficiency. Some of the other areas that brilliant men and women are working on today are much more difficult to see, and that's what I'm actually most excited about in the broader blockchain and Web3 space.
Well, I know we are pretty much out of time, so thank you both for your continued leadership and dedicated efforts in this space. It's truly appreciated, and I hope we can give hearty applause throughout the room. Yes. Thanks,
everybody.